on the Free Time Mastermind podcast. My name is Robert Gaines. I've got Bob Labbe, who's an engineer. He's back for his second interview. He was actually had the highest live audience of anybody we've had before. So that's really, really proud of that. I have to pause this because it's playing the video at the same time. Bob, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good, Robert. I appreciate you having me again, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
That's right. Bob, I got to tell you that we could probably do 3 hours because you've got such a vast wealth of knowledge and experience. We were just talking off camera about some stuff that I hope we can get into, but I also want to recap why the previous episode was so attractive to people. So let me ask you one question. As an inventor, because you have that engineer's mind and you have an approach that I really respect and the one that I prefer. But for young inventors trying to get started, give me one piece of advice. If somebody came to you and said, "Look, I have this invention, and regardless of its viability, what's one thing that they really need to get right when they get started with their idea?"
Well, you know, you just have to invoke the problem-solving approach to inventing anything. If you define the problem first, and then you analyze the problem, and then you consider the possible solutions. Maybe you do some prototyping, and ultimately you come up with the right solution given the different alternatives that are available to you. And I think you got to use the problem solving approach, the engineering approach, and you'll get to the right solution pretty quick.
That makes a lot of sense, Bob. How long were you engineering before, or let me ask it this way. How old were you when you invented your first thing? Now, regardless of whether you patented it or not, what was the first invention? Because we didn't get into that before.
Well, that's true. I was in the engineering business of air pollution control for basically 55 years, and we knew very quickly in the engineering field, even if you invented something, it was not something that was something you would necessarily patent because all people in the air pollution control all were very good engineers with all the various companies, and they were smart enough to make a little minor change to whatever you invented and do it themselves. So getting the utility of patent in the air pollution control engineering field was not very valuable because it was easily modified and done by somebody else equally as good. So I had a lot of ideas. I still have 5 ideas in my file drawer here that I never patented, and some of it have already been done by others. And so I didn't patent anything until I came along to this coaster because it was a pet peeve that was with me my whole life.
Well, that's right. That's how the start of a lot of inventions are, right? It's somebody has some type of problem. They think about it. They think, boy, this should exist. They get frustrated. But the difference is you had the background. And what one thing we touched on before is the material sciences, which I think a lot of people, I mentioned it a little bit, shameless plug for my book. I mentioned a little bit about the materials because the material science is something that I think a lot of inventors should spend a little bit of time on because that's going to determine how something gets manufactured. You've got the ultimate coaster. So, of course, I'm thinking because I've got a little background, is it going to be 3D printed? Is it going to be stamped? Is it going to be extruded? Is it vacuumed? So there's all these different ways. And I have just a minuscule amount of information about how things are done, unlike you. So when you had that idea, how quickly did you go to the napkin? What was your process when you started to capture that idea on paper or on a computer?
Well, having identified what the problem was and knowing it was pet peeve and being an engineer, what I do is I put my ideas on paper and I drew the initial idea from my head. And then when I got back to my home and office, I then got my mechanical engineer's tools out and did it in good hand form. But then I gave it to my chief engineer for my APC company and said, Tony, make a good AutoCAD drawing for me. And so he did, and that's where we started from. But drawing it, putting your idea on paper is essential. If you have an idea, first thing to do, put the idea on paper. However grossly inaccurate it is in the beginning, you can always continue to codify the idea and make it better, better, better until it is what you want it to be.
And you touched on a point that I wanted to expand on, Bob, because it caught my attention last time that we talked that you've got somebody that you can talk to that speaks the same language that you can discuss ideas. And I think it was the gentleman that you said that worked for your company. So can you tell me a little more about him, his background, and what his role is in that company?
Well, Tony is still, he's an old guy like me, and not as old as I am, but he's still an old guy. And we think he went to Georgia Tech too. Okay.
Okay.
And
And you
so,
said, by the way, Georgia Tech was the hardest experience of your life, which that really caught my attention because not to overstep your answer, but we were talking about how much more rigorous education was during that era. So I just want to add that.
yeah, I mean, it was indeed, Georgia Tech was the hardest 4.5, 4.75 years I've ever spent in my life because, as I was telling you earlier, I studied 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, and the professors there. If you had, I had a course where I had 79.9, and I asked the professor if he would give me a B because 80 was a B, and he said, "No, sir, you got a 79.9, you get a C." And that's the
Lord
way it
have
was. They
mercy.
didn't curve your grade number up. They curved it to whatever it was.
Well, I think something when we were doing the pre-show a couple of minutes before we got started, when we were technically in the green room, I got thinking about something that you had mentioned because how much more rigorous the academics were back then, and we didn't have AI and we didn't have a lot of tools we could lean on, and the culture was different. I was explaining to somebody the other day when I went to basic training, I went to a very unusual place. I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which hadn't done at that time. It was the run up to the Gulf War, and they hadn't done basic training since Vietnam. So when I tell people I went to Fort Bragg, people don't believe it because they only opened up Fort Bragg for about 6 months and they trained a bunch of people through there. And it was so, I'm not going to say harder because so other vets will get mad at me, but I'll tell you what, probably 20% of the people got sent home, which is a very high rejection rate for the Army, and they always joke the Army will take anybody. I don't think that's true. I came in when they started changing the standards. They wanted people with higher GT scores. They wanted people that could think on their own. Of course, there were downsides to that. When you get a bunch of people who think on their own, it's hard to execute orders. So the Army was really struggling with that at the time. But the number of people that didn't graduate at my basic was very unusual. We had a high failure rate. People just because it was a run up right before war, and I think the drill sergeants were a little tougher, and the standards were briefly a little bit higher. And yeah, but I was molded by that. I think the experience was fantastic. It was basic training for me at Fort Bragg was exactly what I signed up for. And as a matter of fact, when they kind of rolled things back and were a little easier on us in the AIT and the job training, I was disappointed. I thought it was going to be more like basic training most of my career. So I was actually a little disappointed because I understand, and obviously you understand the power of you have to be put on the lathe. And the lathe reshapes, but it's painful. And obviously we're not talking about abusing people and making and degrading people, but you have to put people to the lathe to get to the best of who they are. Do you think there are any organizations or groups that are doing that right, Bob, or does everybody need to step up?
Well, I still think there's some great places to be educated. I don't think, for instance, even though Georgia Tech has a different theme today, being more of a total university instead of an engineering college, the standards there are really pretty tough. And I've had my nephew and niece, and I've had family members go there since then, and they're still pretty strict upon how they expect you to respond to the opportunity of education they give you. So yeah, I think there's a lot of still very, very good institutions around the country that still you can get a very fundamental education and go forth with a mind that's able to solve problems and think. Because the best thing that I think any kid can get from going to college of any sort is when you get out of school, do you know how to think? And if you know how to think, then the world of practicality, they can fill your bucket with it, and you'll know how to water the garden.
That's right. That's right. I don't know if this is true, but there was a rumor about 20 years ago that there were a few universities that started to hire a farmer and his wife to they were essentially really popular on the circuit for speaking, and they were teaching common sense. I'm from Kentucky, so we say horse sense. Everything is either related to horses, tobacco, coal, or whiskey. That's our contribution to the world. So we have a lot of horse metaphors, so we say horse sense. Or if somebody goes with the bad employer, instead of a good one, we say you backed the wrong horse. So we have all these horse comparisons to stuff. I love the Kentucky culture. It's a beautiful state on top of that. Hopefully people get a chance to check it out. But I wanted to go back into the coaster for a moment. So you've got the idea. You go to somebody in the company, and what is that? What does that company do? Because we didn't get into that before. We just focused on the invention, but tell us about that company.
Well, the company that I worked on my life in air pollution control. Yeah, what we actually did, we solved air pollution control problems for primarily utility plants, power utility plants, steel mills, cement plants, and all manner of rock products and pulp and paper. And that. So big industry is who we served through the years, and we built air pollution. We designed and built air pollution control systems for them.
So
And,
Bob, I'm sorry.
Tony was my chief engineer through the last 20 years.
Tony, that's the guy I wanted,
Yeah,
Tony.
yeah,
Now, when we talk about, believe it or not, I had my family back home in Kentucky are heavily involved in it used to be called LG&E, Louisville Gas and Electric. I think some Germans or somebody people from the Netherlands bought them out, and it's called something different now. But my entire childhood, it was Louisville Gas and Electric. So, were you guys materially involved in when the government started requiring the scrubbers and all that? Was that part of what you guys were doing? Because that was big business, Bob. If you were involved in that, then I have some idea of the scale of what you guys were doing, mega projects, it sounds like.
yes, we were. We were very much involved in SO2 scrubbing, using wet scrubbers and dry scrubbers and semi-dry scrubbers. We had all the technologies, and we used Venturi scrubbers and bag houses and pack towers. We did the whole enchilada. An average job for us was turnkey, which was the full system installed. The average price of the job was about $7.5 million.
Yes, which some of this we're talking in the 80s. So adjusted for inflation, we're in the 20 maybe 20 million range. It's a
Right.
big projects. And for people that don't know, I can get and correct me if I'm wrong here, Bob, because I'm speaking outside of my expertise. But what I remember when Louisville Gas and Electric and several other power plants, particularly in the kind of the Midwest or the Valley, Ohio Valley, there was this big push. It was basically an environmental push to make power plants burn cleaner because there was I don't know if you'd call it effluviant, but there was stuff coming out of the for the people like me in the audience. There was a chimney and there was stuff coming out that wasn't good, and so there was this big environmental push to try to control what the emissions were. So just like you want to control in 1971 the death of the death of the people say, well, why did the muscle cars die? And well, it was because of regulation in 1970. In 1971, they put the catalytic. I'm oversimplifying, Bob, so correct me if I'm wrong, but they put the catalytic converter, which kind of choked the horsepower, and that effectively ended the muscle car era. So the power generation went through a similar thing where they wanted to kind of put a catalytic converter on that, so to speak, on that chimney. It was big business, much better for the environment, this stuff that they did. And the of course the power companies pushed back, but in the long run, Bob, it didn't end up costing as much as a lot of people projected, and the benefits were much higher. Would you agree with that analysis, or did I get any of that wrong?
No, that's absolutely correct. And as a matter of fact, I'm a proponent. I believe in the clean coal, burning of clean coal, because we have the technology, the know-how to do it. We burn coal in this country, United States, better than anyone else in the world because of our ability to clean up the SO2, the NOx, all the greenhouse gases. Now there's always room for constant improvement. And the harder you get to 100% control, you asymptotically approach that position, and it gets the solutions get more difficult. So there's a lot of research and development has to be done, but to think of a society that we would give up fossil fuels as our fuel for production energy power is completely asinine as far, excuse my language, but it's asinine to even think that way because all the clean energies like windmills and geothermal and uh, um, uh, the battery production stuff, the solar stuff, it's great, and it's clean, but getting the batteries and mining the material, the very noble metals that you must have to make those special batteries to do that kind of power production is extremely poisonous materials. So
That's right.
consequently, and when you get it all done and you sum up all the green energy possibilities, that's still only equates to 10% of the demand for power.
Sure, sure. And
And
I don't
so,
I don't have a dog in that fight, Bob, but I'll tell you, all I do is I look at the data. So I don't say, oh, everything should be, save the porpoises. I just look at the data. And I'll agree with you. I've seen the logistics and the data behind a lot of these green technologies. They're terrible, terrible. If I was a paying customer and I was paying for performance, we're talking about, like you said, if a power plant that's optimized for burning coal is like a Ferrari, and the best windmill we have out there is like a bike with a little motor on it. I mean, the numbers as far as the quality of inputs to outputs, it almost makes sometimes I'm a little dismayed why we go into the projects. And I understand the people get excited about them, and it's a
yeah,
big, the government can write a big check and the contractors who lobby the government are happy. Let's be honest, that's how it works. But when you really look at the numbers, a good coal plant, and I'm not just saying that from Kentucky, although the Kentucky coal miners watching this are dancing right now. But it's true. You said it exactly right. A well-tuned coal power generation plant is far superior and safer in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm a fan of nuclear too, but you don't have to worry about a coal plant, destroying all of humanity like Chernobyl. There's
right.
there's risk with that. But let's go back to the coaster for a second. So what was the process? And I did ask this before, but I wanted a short recap. Is that produced through extrusion? Talk about what they're actually doing without, giving us all the secrets away. How is that produced? Because your coaster, and if you've got one, if you could hold it up, the design is so intricate on it. You can tell that it's perfectly designed to move water away from the bottom of a glass. It's brilliant.
And it's a die cast material. We use ABS
Die cat.
material for making this, and it's safe up to about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can use it on hot drinks as well as cold drinks, and it's dishwasher safe. So after you use it for an evening with a bunch of guests, you just throw them in the dishwasher, clean them up, and put them back to the place. But yeah, we the, the coasters. This is, by the way, as I think I've told you before, Robert. This is the only coaster in the world that really works because it functions to capture, convey, collect, and contain the condensate in this pan. And there's little capillaries, half or 1 millimeter semicircles between each of the grids here. You have vertical and horizontal grids. And what happens when your condensate flows off the side of your glass? It'll hit one of these grid members, and it'll flow because of that capillary action into one of those half-millimeter semicircles, and that will cause it to flow down into the pan. And that's how it collects the condensate and it saves you from getting condensate on your clothes, your carpet, and your cocktail table. And that's the reason I invented it first. This was a pet peeve of mine, and that's what came from the pet peeve. And that you
And
get them in, we have them in. We put designs on them for NFL. We'd love to do the Masters. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're working on it. And we're trying
yeah.
to do all these. We've done a lot of golf clubs, and so we're trying to do a lot of National Rifle Association, 4-H, all the big players out there, because these are great giveaways for fundraising events. And and they're very inexpensive. And the one thing about this coaster, unlike all the other coasters on the market, this one really does what it's supposed to do, and it works.
Well, you really impressed me last time, Bob, because you've got a because I like ABS because ABS, as soon as you said die cast, it was ABS. I knew it was something that was going to be very durable and long lasting, which is great. You know, ABS is a fantastic material. But we also you had teased that you're looking at a bamboo model, which is bamboo is one of the most sustainable woods on planet Earth. I mean, it's really grass. You know, it's not technically a tree. I got schooled on that a while back, but I think that's amazing too. I think that would be very popular. But what if you had a magic wand? Are you trying to get on QVC? Do you want it? Do you want to be in Bed Bath and Beyond? What's the dream scenario for you for to move volume?
Well, I think being associated with all the promotional companies, okay,
Okay.
and serving places like the great venues of the world, like Pebble Beach, the Masters, and the Golf Arena, serving the NRA and the shooting, the rifle range type of stuff, and then the Cancer Society, Parkinson's disease, all these different societies where these particular coasters can be used for fundraisers to raise money for worthy causes. And participatory through the promotional companies, we can access a lot of different big industries. The beverage industry, these are good. These are good promotional items for them, and restaurants and bars. If you have a high quality, like say the Cloister down in the island down in Georgia, or you have some special event place, like again the Masters, where you have a Masters coaster. I mean, having a Masters coaster in your house and having one that really works is a real plus because furniture. My wife and I, we had a visitor. We don't recall which one, but they left their hot drink on one of our antique pieces of furniture, and,
Oh
and
Lord.
let a heat stain on there, and it cost me $850 to have that had
Oh
that
my
little had
gosh.
that little spot fixed. So I mean, coasters play a very good role, and as expensive as quality furniture is this day, these are very inexpensive solutions.
Yes, I had a little bit of PTSD there because I had a flashback of the person that taught me to use coasters, and I'm ashamed to say, I'm from a blue collar working family in Kentucky, so I wasn't very, I don't when I drink tea, I don't put my pinky out there, and so I wasn't real, and the Army didn't help with that either, but I was probably in my I had to be at least be in my mid 30s. And a nice lady from Texas named Catherine, I'll give her a shout out because I'm sure she watches the program. But she had some nice furniture, and I made the mistake of putting, Texas is South Texas, so it's hot. So those drinks sweat just like when you were in Florida before, and I'm almost on the equator now. So drinks sweat, as soon as they come out of the refrigerator, they look like they've been in the shower. So, but yeah, she schooled me. She had some real nice stuff, and she said, "Baby, when you come over here, you always got to get that coaster out for the drinks." So, and I do. I'm the same way now. I've always had coasters, but also too, I wanted to talk about because I love how you think about things as an engineer. I think that's a great way to approach things. That strong left brain, analytical, logical thinking several steps ahead. You applied that same approach to golf. Can you tell us about the book? Because I was really excited. I'm sorry to everybody that we didn't get to that before.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because as a matter of fact, I was just out in Las Vegas the last 4 days, doing four different television programs and doing a 30-minute interview on the golf course about my book. So I'm glad you brought that up because I'm very fresh with all the information on that. And there's a picture, a
Putting
copy of
by
my
the
book.
numbers. And we'll
Putting by
we'll we'll put a link to that in the comments. Do you want them to go to Amazon to buy that? Do you want them to go directly to your site?
Well, it's very available at Amazon in soft copy, hard copy, ebook, and in audiobook. So you can get it all
Wow.
for a
Get
bag.
out of here. That's fantastic.
And very truthfully, if you go to Amazon, you probably get the best sale deal. but you can get it on my website at boblobby.com, or
Mhm.
you can get it on puttingbythenumbers.com. And then if you do go to any one of those, whether you go to Amazon or any of my sites, please, if you buy the book, please give me a review. I need more
Yes,
reviews,
that's right.
and we've sold lots and lots. As a matter of fact, I'm amazed. We're approaching 10,000 book sales now,
Wow.
is pretty good. And I'm trying to become a bestseller at 100,000 books. So we're gonna we're going to take the book and we're going to translate it to Japanese and get it into the Japanese. It's all over the world right now, and I've done podcasts all over the world on the book. But I need to get it into Japanese because there's 9 million Japanese golfers over there, and you know how intense they are about their golf. So I think they would really like to know about this quantitative method.
And
And
yeah, yeah.
what caused me to write this book was because I had a problem. When I started playing golf back in 1996 at age 52, I, the other 13 clubs, I went up to Maggie Valley, North Carolina, and went to a PGA school and learned in 4 days the basic strokes of the game because the PGA pros taught me how to use the clubs. But as engineers, as you probably know, engineers really are intense about practicing and intense about getting it right. So I was a great practicer. I played after 1996, and that was after my second retirement, or that was after, yeah, my second retirement. I I practiced golf 3 days a week, and I played 3 days a week. And so my game accelerated very quickly. I got to be very good. I had about 48 to 52 strokes with 13 clubs in my bag, but my putter was killing me because I was using between 40 and 44 putts per round, and I was shooting in the 90s when I should have been shooting in the 80s. Okay, and for an amateur golfer, shooting 80s isn't too bad, you know. So I said, hey, I had a bunch of friends at the golf game. I called them up and told them what a problem I was having with my putting. Well, nobody could give me an answer. And then I got to thinking about the stimp meter. And Edward Stimpson developed the stimp meter back in 1935, and the USDA didn't really accept it until 1976. But it was used and is now used worldwide on most of all the tournaments at all the pro levels as to determine the speed of the green. What's interesting about the stimp meter is it's a qualitative method of determining the speed of the green. And I thought to myself, well, if there was a qualitative, you just put the ball on a tube on a notch and you lift it up and then let the ball roll onto the green. You do that with three balls. If they come within 2 feet of each other, they establish that if it rolls 13 feet, then the speed of the green is 13 for that day. And that tells you a 13 centimeter reading is a very fast reading. And I thought to myself, well, gosh, if you had a qualitative method, why couldn't you convert that into a quantitative method? And that's what my book's all about, a quantitative method of long distance putting. And
That's right.
and I tell her,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
and
Sorry.
I tell everybody I guarantee you can save 4 to 5 strokes around if you'll use this method. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to
That's right, and of course, qualitative isn't just for our audience to separate the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative, of course, is by the numbers. That's why you call it putting by
it.
the numbers. But qualitative is probably less well understood. I think most people know that quantitative has to do with data and with numbers. But a lot of things do start with a qualitative an observation. Can you explain to us what that might be, for instance?
Yeah, like you say, qualitative and quantitative are differentiate each other because one deals with numbers and facts and actually a numerical solution. The other one gives you a relative solution. In other words, the stimp meter tells you, relatively speaking, how fast the greens are, but doesn't tell you for your putting stroke how fast they are. It only tells you that, hey, 13 is a number, but it doesn't have any units to it. It only tells you 13, the ball will travel 13 feet off this little tube, but that has nothing to do with the stroking with the putter. So it's an indication and gives you a numerical reading as to being a green, whether it's fast or slow. For instance, if you had a 7 reading on a stimp meter, that means it's pretty slow. So you have to hit the ball harder. Well, what's different about mine? Mine tells you how hard to hit the ball and how far to retract your putter from the ball before you stroke it. And that's where the quantitative differs from qualitative. One is a relative number, one is a real factual numerical number you can use to be successful.
And Bob, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the brilliant aspects of your analysis of the golf game, because I've seen when people who are fully formed human beings, adult, they're way past college, they have a lot of life experience. When they first walk into a hobby or an endeavor for the first time at 52, in your case, you're bringing all that big, large bag of tools into that situation. So somebody who learned to golf because the high school I went to had a monster golf team. I mean, they were unbelievable. So these young men were being because I went to an all male high school, so that's why I'm not saying women. I'm not a sexist. It's just it was an all male school, folks. I'm sorry. So when they were teaching these young men at 15 or 16, so they're being put in the furnace and being formed as a golfer at 15, 16, maybe even before that, but you're walking in cold, so to speak, at 52 with this deep thinking engineer approach, which I think lent itself perfectly for you to develop this system. Do you think people that walk in with a lot more experience and try something new for the first time would more readily develop a system like that than somebody because they're not going to have that intuitive approach?
Yeah, well, I think that this approach is really beneficial to anybody that has is their game is suffering because they can't judge long distance putts
Mhm.
well. And whether you're young or you're small, a young mind is like an open sponge and it absorbs everything. An older mind that's been filled with lots of data and knowledge and stuff like that kind of gets saturated. But I think all one thing that all golfers have in common is everybody wants to make their game better. Okay, and golfers will spend an inordinate amount of money to try to do that.
That's right.
Whereas with my approach, I'm guaranteeing you 4 to 5 strokes a round. If your putting is not up what you expect it to be, and see, last year as an 82-year-old man, I putted 30.5 putts per round, whereas in the early days I was putting 40 to 44 putts per round. So I've improved my game about 12 strokes per inch, and I have a 7 handicap at age 82. Okay, so and I'm not hitting the ball as long or as good as I used to hit it, but I'm still hanging in there, only because of my putting. My putting, I would go on any course and challenge anybody to a putting contest, even the pros. And I hope one of the pros pick me up because I'd love to meet them at the Masters and let's putt the Masters green.
That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. Well,
Yeah,
there are podcasters out there that have golfers, and there are podcasts run by golfers. So I hope you get to do that. Well, believe it or not, we ran through the time once again. We didn't have a single technical issue this time, so the clouds parted for us and the sun shined the entire time. Now, as far as I didn't add this before, but if they want to get the coaster, do you want them to come to your website or do you want them to go to Amazon?
well, they can get it from both sources, but our coaster website is ultimatecoasterco.com, and they can see the various coasters, very colors, and the clear coasters. If you have say an organization you'd like to get, you can just send us your logo artwork, and we can print it for you, UV printed on the back and in the center, and sell you these coasters. 4 of these sell retail about 19.99. Okay, and that's with printing on both sides, permanent printing on both sides. You can put these in your dishwasher, and they'll last a very very long time. We don't even know how long they will last, but maybe a lifetime. But that's good enough.
That's my last set of coasters lasted a decade. They were a slightly different material, but comparable to ABS, and they looked exactly the same after 10 years. And the only reason why I don't have them anymore is I had to get rid of so many things when I moved, and every little bit of weight counts when you're moving internationally. So I had to let go of a lot of things. But yeah, that so almost if you think about it, most people will have coasters for a lifetime. Or at least for a generation, I don't know if it's something we would pass down to the next generation, but who knows? Furniture there might not be furniture in the future. We don't know, but for the time being, they need the ultimate coaster. And if they're a golfer, they need to get putting by the numbers. Bob Labbe, I appreciate you coming in. Any questions you wish I had asked in the wrap up?
No, I think you covered it. You covered it very well, Robert. And again, I appreciate having the time to have this conversation with you and you having me on your program because I think you asked some really good questions, and I hope I gave you some good answers.
You absolutely did. If you don't mind, Bob, I'll end the stream for all of those folks watching on YouTube, which I appreciate everybody, especially the subscribers, especially Mike Dry out there in Pascagoula, Mississippi, in our comment section. We've also got okay, Bookhaven official. I think somebody else is in the chat here. That's somebody associated with you, Bob, I think,
Yeah,
right?
I should have brought that up. My publicist and literary agent and the people I work with, bookhavenliterary.com, and they're in Jackson, Mississippi.
Jackson,
And
Mississippi. Yeah.
yes,
So
sir.
oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say both people in the comment sections are from Mississippi. So that's fantastic. But Bookhaven official, I did see that they're helping with your Podmatch. Of course, we're both alumni of Podmatch, and they can check out Bookhaven official too. I know they have a website. Probably great folks doing
Yeah.
PR for.
Well, Gabby Garcia is my publicist and literary agent. She does a great job for me because she obviously sets up all these podcasts for me. And as I say, we just finished a week out in Las Vegas doing some. We do her on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CW television out there with interviews live, and it was fun. And then we went to the golf course and did a promotional demonstration of the all facets of the technique. So it was a fun week, and I didn't gamble out there because the gambling machines are different than when I used to was I was a kid and I was foolish enough to gamble because I don't even understand what they do now. It's getting far too complicated.
Yeah, there's a joy, and I don't like the modern gambling either. There is a joy to putting the coin in and all
Yeah.
that. There was something tactile to that I think that I miss. I can't just put my credit card and press a button. That's not gambling to me. I got to throw a pair of dice or wrestle somebody, and there's got to be something going on. But thank you to Gabby too for putting us together, especially after you did all of that mainstream media for you to come down here and talk to us on the Free Time Mastermind podcast, Bob Labbe. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, I'll end the stream and we'll continue on Zoom.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else that you can ask questions in the comment section, and I'll pass them on to Bob. Thank you, everybody. All right, Bob, we've got all of that taken care of, and